Peace, peace. Greetings to you all. It's your brother Naheem, BKA Lord Abba, aka Mr. Just the Facts. Tonight, I'm going to get into the issue of the myth that is blackness and whiteness. Hit the like button, family. Share this out. Shout out to the fam that's in the building. I see y'all, brother Nick. BTP Mart, I see you. FF80OS now. Sister Brianna, peace, peace. I'm gonna spark a little discussion tonight. I think some of the bros are gonna be on in a little while, but I kind of put together a PowerPoint because I really want to get into this thing, right? I want to get into this. You know, we touch on this thing before, right? On the Be the Power channel, but I want to go over it again because in order to fix race in the United States of America, it must be properly addressed. It must be properly addressed. Shout out Corey the ADOS vegan. Shout out Sister Sin. We got a brother tuning in from Brisbane, Australia. Kevin Webster, shout out to you. Lyrica is ADOS, the amazing 1029. Shout out to everybody that's tuning in. So I'm going to be reading from this book right here, White by Law, a little bit later on in this stream as well. No, we're going to really broach this particular topic about blackness and whiteness. Those of you who are familiar with me know that I come from out of the Moorish movement. And it is the teachings of, and I say it all the time, the teachings of Prophet Noble Drew Ali that put me right here in this particular space, prepared to have a portion of the conversation that is not necessarily spoken of in the context and importance, I believe, that is needed. And that is the issue of blackness and whiteness. The issue of blackness and whiteness. These two racial constructs are, I believe, these are the things that hold us back. I explained on one live stream, whiteness serves as in this, if you want to use an analogy of us being in water, so to speak, right? Whiteness serves as a flotation device, and blackness serves as an anchor. And I'm going to touch on some of that tonight and get into the psychology of this topic. I want to go through just enough so that it will be, put on your brains as well, something that sits in your chest as well, to say, okay, this is how, we move forward as we move forward in our political fight. Because I believe, as many of you believe, that blackness and whiteness is an issue. Blackness and whiteness. So let me get into my presentation tonight. Again, if you're just coming in, family, hit the like button, share the video out. We're gonna go into a little teaching session tonight. So and I won't be able to see the live chat. So mods, I already know y'all are gonna hold it down. But let me see if I can even pull it up while I am on here. Let's see. Okay, I can see the chat a little bit from here, from my phone. Okay, cool. So let me get into this. Let's get into this. Okay. The black and white myth. Are you black? Are they white? And I know this topic is a touchy topic, right? But there's a reason why I have these two images up on the screen. It is to give visual aid and help break the psychology, the psychological grip of what's called white supremacy by noting that the man on the left is a depiction of what a black man would look like, right? These Europeans have tricked us, deceived us into tricking our own mind to deceive our own eyes. The image on the right is a depiction of a white man. How a person would look if they had actual white skin. No one looks like that. I was having a conversation with my neighbor yesterday, and he stopped me, European, quote unquote, white man. And he said, I hear you on the phone talking politics all the time. I just wanted to pick your brain a little bit. And we got into the whole thing, and he said something about having the same opportunities. And you know, I went in and I spoke to this issue of black and whiteness. And I put my hand on the black car. And when he looked, he laughed because he had never looked at it like that before. I was forcing him outside of his worldview. So the next slide, I said I'm going to read from this book tonight, Ian Haney Lopez's White by Law, a critical read in understanding the construction of whiteness and how all other racial and pretty much other ethnic categories is centripetal to whiteness. Whiteness serves as the nexus, and rightfully so if you created the racial system to whereas you have hegemonic whiteness between not only Anglo-Saxons in America, but whites from all over the world. You know, the Irish become white after a while. The Italians become white after a while, after at first them not being considered a part of the white race. So in the introduction on page 11, Lopez says races are not biologically differentiated groupings, but rather social constructs. This is the consensus of those who study this particular field of race theory, and some may call critical race theory. He says on page 2, I conclude that whiteness exists at the vortex of race in U.S. law and society, and that whites should renounce their racial identity as it is currently constituted in the interests of social justice. Now, that is a powerful quote. That is a powerful quote. And it is the answer to tonight's topic, right? How do we fix the race problem in America? Well, Lopez gives us the answer right there, partially only. He only partially gives us the answer because you can't just denounce whiteness. Its counter must also be denounced as well. So let's get into this. At top, we see a palette for skin tones. And you see that it ranges from dark brown to amber to tan down to peachy, right? And lighter shades of this tone we can see on various humans. The lightest shade I do not have up here, which is the one that represents European people. They're not white. You can look at the background of the screen and compare it to the skin of anybody called white, and you'll be able to see that no one has that particular skin tone. At the bottom, we have what is called the gray scale. And this is a scale that shows extreme blackness, all the way down to white, because black, gray, and white are technically not colors. They are shades, and you can look this up. They are considered colors because we group them in with brown and red and yellow and orange, but technically they are shades. They are not colors. So I want you all to take a look at this, because I think that these visual aids are important. Where do you fit in on the top bar, right? Every last one of us fits in on that top bar somewhere, but none of us fit in at the bottom bar. For instance, if there was a such thing as black or white people, then a black person and a white person would be able to get together and their babies would be gray. Because when you mix black and white together, you get gray. This is simple. This is simple. This is not hard. This is not rocket science, but we have been programmed to think a certain type of way. And so, as we make pushes for racial equality, the issue of race itself must be broached properly. Okay. This is from the Brookings Institute on race. So I'm going to read this. Many American dilemmas. The statistical politics of counting race, and in recent years, Americans, the headline says many American dilemmas. The statistical politics of counting by race and ethnicity. It continues. This was published June 1st, 1996. In recent years, Americans have been understandably anxious that their increasingly diverse society is fragmenting along group lines and identities. And we see that now with the ADOS movement, with Tariq Nasheed's FBA, with various groups here in the United States of America, AKA Black people, AKA Black Americans, African Americans, who are trying to distinguish themselves from those who may come from Nigeria, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It reads, now a massive new federal government survey sheds considerable light on such concerns. And while this study offers some comforting evidence that these group identities are hardly as fixed or rigid as we typically assume, it also suggests that their very fluidity will fuel controversy over how and where to draw lines between groups. And this is important. This is very, very important. This is very important. It says explicitly denying any scientific or anthropological authority for its determinations, Directive 15 nevertheless established 5 basic categories to be used by federal agencies: white, black, Hispanic, Asian or Pacific Islander, and American Indian or Alaskan Native. OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, went on to stipulate that these are racial categories except Hispanic, which was defined as an ethnic category. In other words, as is often stated in the fine print at the bottom of government documents, Hispanics can be at or be of any race. Interesting. Interesting. So, those of you familiar with the program know that we've dug into Federal Directive 15 here before. We've pulled out that quote that you see in red that says these classifications should not be interpreted as being scientific or anthropological in nature. I don't know if y'all are seeing this right now. Wait, hold on. Hold on. I don't know if y'all are seeing this right now. I don't think that I've shared the screen properly. So let me get up out of here. I haven't shared the screen. I'm just going in. Pardon me, family. Pardon me. All right, here we go. Much better. Much better. Much better. All right, so Federal Directive 15 federal racial classifications. It says these classifications should not be interpreted as being scientific or anthropological in nature. Y'all have heard me speak about this on this platform, that if they're not using science or anthropology, what are they using? And they list these 5 groups, as I just read from the last source: American Indian or Alaskan Native, Asian or Pacific Islander, Black, Hispanic, and white. The last article that I've read also goes into some of the classifications that are being used for certain people, like Asian or Pacific Islander, that some people from Hawaii, for instance, have a problem with, right? And we've broken this down on Be the Power before. I'm going to go right to Black. It says a person having origins in any of the Black racial groups of Africa. For white, it says a person having origins in any of the original peoples of Europe, North Africa, or the Middle East. So all of these terms are ambiguous. But one of the things that you will notice when you're reading these classifications, it'll say a person having origins in any of the original peoples, for the American Indians, the original peoples of the Asian or Pacific Islanders. But when it comes to Black, it just says a person having origins in any of the Black racial groups of Africa. Even for white, it says a person having origins in any of the original peoples of Europe, North Africa, or the Middle East. Well, if that's the case, the original people of these regions look like us, so-called Black people, what I call Moors. Okay, so let's dig a little bit deeper into this. Now, this is from Britannica.com, and it deals with the issue of race. It says the scientific classification of race. In publications issued from 1735 to 1759, Linnaeus, meaning Carl von Linnaeus, classified all the then known animal forms. He included humans with the primates and established the use of both genus and species terms for identification of all animals. For the human species, he introduced the still current scientific name Homo sapiens. He listed 4 major subdivisions of the species: H. americanus, H. africanus, H. europaeus, and H. asiaticus. Such was the nature of knowledge at the time that Linnaeus also included the categories H. monstrous, which included many exotic peoples, and H. ferus, wild man, an indication that some of his categories were based on tall tales and travelers' myths. So here we find the European defining humans in ways that they see fit, even adding myths like H. monstrosus. Okay, that's how you pronounce it, monstrosus, and H. ferus, for anybody that they deemed were wild or mixed exotic people. So the idea of race itself is built upon a fallacy. So, of course, I bring you to the person that I've learned my teachings from, right? The teachings of the man who I follow. And I want to bring you here for a reason, because Noble Drew Ali mentions some specific dates. So bear with me while I teach tonight, family. This is from Act 6 of the Divine Constitution and Bylaws of the Moorish Science Temple of America. Noble Drew Ali says some key things and uses some key dates. He said, with us, all members must proclaim their nationality, and we are teaching our people their nationality and their divine creed, that they may know that they are a part and a partial of this said government, and know that they are not Negroes, colored folks, Black people, or Ethiopians, because these names were given to slaves by slaveholders in 1779 and lasted until 1865 during the times of slavery. But this is a new era of time now, and all men now must proclaim their free national name to be recognized by the government in which they live in the nations of the earth. So Prophet Noble Drew Ali was stressing that these names that we have, Negroes, Black people, colored folk, and Ethiopian, which was used at that time, and I'm going to get into that, were given to slaves by slaveholders in 1779 and lasted until 1865. So essentially what Prophet Noble Drew Ali is saying is that these names are badges of slavery. And under these names, there's this weakness attached to it. They are creatures, if you will, of our legislative will, because we are the white race. And because we are the white race, blacks in general are merely creatures of our legislative will. In chapter 47 of what we nickname the Circle 7, he teaches through sin. Now notice I have these dates highlighted. He says, through sin and disobedience, every nation has suffered slavery due to the fact that they honored not the creed and principles of their forefathers. He says, this is why the nationality of the Moors was taken away from them in 1774. And the word Negro, black, and colored was given to the Asiatics of America who were of Moorish descent, because they honored not the principles of their mother and father and strayed after the gods of Europe, of whom they knew nothing. There's a lot for me to unpack in that statement right there, but I'm not. I'm going to let a lot of that breathe. The point that I wanted to focus on are these dates of 1779 and 1774. So let us go back to the Britannica article on race. We find an interesting piece of the history relating to 1774. It says, one of those whose direct experience of African slaves and an assessment of them was given great weight as Edward Long, a former plantation owner and jurist in Jamaica, in a book titled The History of Jamaica, which was published in 1774. Long asserted that the Negro was void of genius and incapable of civilization. Indeed, he was so far inferior as to constitute a separate species of mankind. Long's work was published as a defense of slavery during a period of rising anti-slavery sentiment. Its greatest influence came during and after the American Revolutionary War, 1775 between 1783. We get that date in there, that 1779 date in there, when some Southern Americans started freeing their slaves and moving north. Long's writings, published in popular magazines, were widely read in the United States during the last decade of the 18th century. So I want to, y'all can block the King Pseudo Sinetta dude from out the chat, please. Get that guy up out of here, like block him for good. I mean, if you want to come build, we can build, but the trolling is just unnecessary at this point. So I wanted to stress this point. This is a little class session tonight. It's kind of a deviation, but this is what we do at Be the Power, because these dates are important, right? To go back to the 1779 and 1774 dates that Noble Drew Ali had touched on. So I want to get to Johann Blumenbach's work. This is coming from Wikipedia, right? Because, well, let's read. Blumenbach's work included his description of 60 human crania, skulls, published originally in, I'm not going to try to, I guess I can try to pronounce it, Fascisulis as Decus Cranorium, the Göttingen, 1790-1828. This was a founding work for other scientists in the field of craniometry. He divided the human species into 5 races in 1779, later found on crania research, description of human skulls, and called them the Caucasian or white race. Blumenbach was the first to use this term for people of European, Middle Eastern, or North African origin. The Mongolian or yellow race, including all East Asians and some Central Asians. The Malayan or brown race, including Southeast Asian and Pacific Islanders. The Ethiopian or black race, including Sub-Saharan Africans. The American or red race, including American Indians. So this is why we see Prophet Noble Drew Ali referencing these terms, Negro, black, and colored, right? So that is key in understanding how the courts utilize these specific racial classifications. So I go to the book, White by Law by Ian Haney Lopez, on page 4, where he pulls up a case, one of the prerequisite cases which determined whiteness and who would be which race in the United States of America. So I believe this is a Supreme Court ruling, and it reads, and speaking of the various classification of races, Webster in his dictionary, now this is from 1878, family. It says, Webster in his dictionary says, the common classification is that of Blumenbach, who makes 5, and he breaks down all of the different races, right? And it says, this division was adopted from Buffon with some changes in names and is founded on the combined characteristics of complexion, hair, and skull. No one includes the white or Caucasian with the Mongolian or yellow race. So we see how the courts use these 5 categories to determine race. We see that in the United States of America, there are how many racial categories, classifications? There are 5. So there's an element of psychological white supremacy that is still at play here, and we have to break that. We have to break that. This is what this particular platform is dedicated to. Thank y'all for blocking the King Pseudo guy. I couldn't even see what the rest he was saying. I'm focused on what I'm doing. So I want to bring you to this image right here. I hope it's clear enough for y'all. But this is a brother I found, various African tribes, right? We can look at it from this perspective that this brother is a dark, rich brown. Next to him is an image of melanin under a microscope. And we can see, and I don't know how clear you all can see this particular image, but the melanin matches this man's skin tone. It matches his skin tone. So the reason why I wanted to bring that up was I think that it is important that, okay, people are saying that they can't see the screen now. All right, I don't know what's going on, but the reason why I bring that up is important because I want the family to see that, you know, melanin is not what makes you black. The psychology of blackness is what makes us black. White supremacy is what makes us black, because white supremacy needs a mirror in order to be superior, in order to feel and make itself superior. White supremacy needs that. And that's why I say race is purely psychological. Race is a purely psychological thing. Let's get into this, right? Ism. Let's look at racism. Ism is a suffix in many English words, originally derived from the ancient Greek suffix ismos and reaching English through Latin ismus and the French isme. It means taking side with or imitation of. In the etymology, it means study of, right? It says, and it is often used to describe philosophies, theories, religions, social movements, artistic movements, and behaviors. The suffix ism is neutral and therefore bears no connotations associated with any of the many ideologies it identifies. Such determinations can only be informed by public opinion regarding specific ideologies. Now, this is important because try calling a racist and watch how proud he or she is of that title. They don't care. That doesn't bother them. That doesn't move them. In fact, they'll reverse it on you and say, I'm not the racist, you're the racist. For them, they take side with it, as the definition shows. They love it. It is a part of what makes them feel superior. This is why we got to just stop screaming racism. The Jews don't scream racism. The Jews scream anti-Semitism. In the Moorish doctrine, that's why I brought up Prophet Noble Drew Ali. This is the teachings that I teach. Again, I've never tried to come on here and proselytize to anybody at all. I'm just giving you the perspective of my teachings, my worldview, and my frame of thinking. Prophet Noble Drew Ali annexed the L at the end of our names, right? So you see, my last name is Way L. Somebody's name may be, last name may be Johnson, so it's Johnson L. This is to identify that there's a group of people who do not identify with the badges of slavery in the United States of America, that understand that they are a people with an ancestry that is rooted in Americanism and also goes beyond Americanism in the historical record, right? And in these teachings, he speaks of the eponymous characters you may find in the biblical narrative, old man Cush and his father Ham. You see, the Jews scream anti-Semitism. We should be screaming anti-Cushitic or anti-Hamitism, because that is largely what most of these racial suppressive policies and legislations were centered around. The biblical conquest or subjugation, if you will, of Canaan in Genesis verses 9 through 25 through 27. And I'm going to touch on a little bit of that later. So let us get a little bit more into the psychology of this thing that is called black or white. This is from some research that I've done some years ago, right? And bear with me, family. We teaching tonight. I'm in teaching mode tonight. I'm gonna check and see if the bros are gonna come on in a little while, see if they're in the back office. But that was the purpose of tonight's stream, to get into this black thing and this white thing. And I know I'm being a little pedantic, a little book read tonight, but it's needed. It's needed for us to understand the fight that we have on several different fronts. So this is from my research, right? It's from this book called Researches into the Physical History of Mankind, Physical Ethnography of the African Races by James Carls Pritchard, which was published in 1837. Section 1, and it's speaking of the Berber or the Berberines, basically the Berbers. The Arabs call them by the term Nuba. Nuba is also a name that denotes slavery. To my people that want to run around and say, we're Nubians, that's just another name that denotes slavery that the Egyptians gave to the Cushites because they had gold in their land. Maybe I'll do a breakdown on that one day as well. So let me read this quote from this book. He's citing a man named Denon. And in my notes in the article that I have this information pulled up on, I go into Denon and his credentials. It says, Denon has thus described them. He says, their skin is of a shining and jet black, exactly similar to that of antique bronzes. They have not the smallest resemblance to the Negroes in the western parts of Africa. Their eyes are deep set and sparkling with browns hanging over. The nose pointed, the nostrils are large, the mouth wide, the lips of moderate thickness, and the hair and beard in small quantity and hanging in little locks. There's something in this quote that if you're reading it and you're programmed to not see the psychological damage that the racial constructs have done to us, you'd read right over it. So let me read that again. Denon has thus described them. He says their skin is of a shining and jet black, exactly similar to that of antique bronzes. Let's go to the next slide. This is jet black. What you see on the screen right now is jet blackness. This is jet blackness, right? Many of you can look at your clearly brown skin, which is why I put up the skin tone palette in the beginning to show that there's nobody is black, nobody is white. Nobody's black and nobody is white. We range from the darkest of brown to the lightest of tans to a faded brown, which is the color of the European today. That's a fact. So when I did the research, I pulled up, and this was years ago, I said, well, let's see what antique bronzes look like. Interesting. So we see that these antique bronzes matches most of our skin tones. From this particular shade of brown or bronze to lighter shades, this is what antique bronzes look like. So we have to understand the psychology of white supremacy. You see, he said their skins were of a shining jet black, similar to antique bronzes. Well, if any of you were to keyword and search antique bronzes right now, this is what will be pulled up. Nothing would be jet black. Nothing would be jet black. I hope I'm not, going too far over anybody's head. That's why I tried to simplify this thing as much as I can. But blackness and whiteness are our issues. We have to fix the race problem. And the only way to fix the race problem is by addressing blackness and whiteness. It is as simple as that. I had this meme in my lecture. I lectured in Dallas in 2015. And after I broke all of that down, I used this meme. It says, sometimes the thing that is holding you back is all in your head. It is a horse chained to a plastic chair. This horse could drag this chair all over the world. Matter of fact, it probably can drag 100 chairs like it. But because it's so used to being tied down to something, it knows that while that leash is on it, it cannot move, or at least it is not supposed to move. This is what blackness is to us, for many of us. And this European here, the so-called white man, he has done his job in making sure that we stayed attached to this plastic chair. But if we woke up, if we woke up and just looked at ourselves, looked in the mirror and said, I am not black, we can start a change overnight. I'm not asking you to identify with what I identify with. I'm a Moorish American, and I can prove it. I've done so on several of occasions. I can prove it. The history, we've done one of the episodes here on Be the Power a couple months back as well, where I brought some of these things up. So I want to get into this construct of blackness and why it's dangerous, why it was coined in the first place. Start running through some of this stuff real quick. This is from a dictionary of slang and colloquial English by John Stephen Farmer, William Ernest Henley, page 49, published in 1905. Black man, black gentleman, the devil, from 1606. So from 1606, and remember, this is around the year we start to get the English the English version of the King James Bible. I believe that's 1601. And within that context, there are many references to our people that denote that black is sinful in that King James Bible. And it goes beyond that, but we have it in the English. Some copies say, can the Ethiopian change his skin? Or can the black man change his skin? Or can the Moor change his skin? Depending on which Bible version you get. But this is generally what is meant by a black man. And we have accepted this. We have accepted this. All you have to do is just look these things up. I'm putting these sources up on the screen so that everybody can see a dictionary of English phrases. It's the next source. I mean, go look into some of these older texts, and you're going to be able to see black man, the devil. Nobody looks like this. This is visual, empirical confirmation, and an understanding that these people see us a certain type of way. What did the cop that killed Mike Brown say? He looked like he had like a demon in his eyes when he charged at me. This was a justification that had been used for generations to kill our people. And this goes back all the way to Europe and Christianity. And I know some of you may not want to hear this, but the research doesn't lie. The research bears this out. And we've touched on some of that here on Be the Power. So I want to go give more context. I want to go back to Noble Drew Ali, because what he taught was vital in this regard. And this is just me sharing a piece of my ideology with you all and why I'm here in this space and why this particular platform of BTP is where it's at and why we're able to plug into the conversation in a way that we're able to plug into it. Noble Drew Ali taught some critical things. He said, Negro. This is from the Moorish Questionnaire. The first one came out in, I think, 27, and the second one came out in 28. I'm going to read from the second one first. Negro, a name given to a river in West Africa by Moors because it contained black water. Okay, he's talking about the Niger River, which was once viewed as a black water river in West Africa. But it was his first questionnaire that struck me interesting. It says, in all reality, what is a Negro? Answer, a Negro is a four-legged animal. So we start to say, okay, well, where do we find that at? How can we prove that this is true? Research. Research rewards us. And this man, I always say, he gave us breadcrumbs. He wanted us to figure this thing out. He said, there's still much wisdom for us to learn. And he just dropped breadcrumbs that led us to certain places if we would. But so look, those of us who are less dogmatic, well, we found all of this stuff, and the dogmatic ones were mad and tried to push us away. So now, I guess it's a good thing because we're teaching to a wider audience, and it's all relative. It's not like it's not related to the discussion. Blackness, or flat blackness, as it's been called by the ADOS movement, is an issue because blackness itself has always been an issue. So let's see what the research shows. This is from a book called Truth and Light, pages 333 and 334 by a man named Robert Benjamin Lewis, a very powerful scholar. This work was published in 1844. It says Negro is derived from the Latin term Niger, meaning black. What's important there is that today, if you pull up the term Negro, it says it is of an unknown derivation. If you go to Edamon online right now, it says that the term Negro is of unknown. Well, in the early 1800s, it was definitely known that the word Negro, which came from the word Niger, meant black. So it's interesting that we have a cover-up today. Look into these things, family. It says Niger, a Latin word, was formerly used by the Moors, the old Romans, to designate any black inferior object, etc. A plant, a marsh, flat, moist ground, bog, or animal. So, okay, so we find this reference and we can prove it now. We can see that this claim that Prophet Noble Drew Ali made, that Negro means a wild animal, has some precedence in the historical record. We can see that now. Or animal, a word formerly used by the Moors, the old Romans. And that's another history in and of itself about the Moors who were in ancient Rome at that time. Another source, this is from David Walker, an outspoken abolitionist and anti-slavery activist. who lived between the years 1796 to 1830. This is from a book called A Dealer of Old Clothes, Philosophical Conversations with David Walker by Darrell Scriven on page 106. This works was earlier than the works that I just cited. And he said Niger is a word derived from the Latin, which was used by the old Romans to designate inanimate beings, which were black, such as soot, pot, wood, a house, etc. Also animals, which they considered inferior to the human species, as a black horse, cow, hog, bird, dog, etc. Are y'all picking up on the pattern? The European, remember, I read the source from the 1774 book about the Negroes, the slaveholder from Jamaica. He reduced us to the species of animal. He reduced us to the species of animal. And this is what helped facilitate legislators in limiting our rights as a people here in the United States of America. All of this is important. All of this is important as we push forward in our fight, because in some instances we're fighting for one thing, and in another instance we're spinning our wheels in mud. We're not going anywhere. PBS has an article on race. It's on their website. It's powerful. I urge you all to check it out. Is race for real? It says, we all know that people look different. Anyone can tell a Czech from a Chinese, but these are differences. I mean, but are these differences racial? What does race mean? And it gives a whole breakdown on this website. Race is a modern idea. Ancient societies did not divide people according to physical differences, but according to religion, status, class, even language. Well, let's dig into some of what they teach. Let's dig into some of what they teach, because this is important. This is very important. They are not white. Early colonial laws refer to Christians or Englishmen rather than whites, reflecting the greater importance of religious or national differences. Around the time of Bacon's rebellion in 1676, new laws began to appear, separating black slaves from European indentured servants. Slavery becomes permanent and heritable for Negroes, and black people are punished more harshly for crimes. Poor whites are given new rights and opportunities, including as overseers to police slaves. As the importance of slavery grows, white is used almost exclusively, not only in law, but other social arenas, and slavery becomes associated increasingly with blackness. I'll go back to what my teacher said. I'll go back to what he said. When he said that Negro, black, and colored are names that delude to slavery. These are the names that delude to slavery. So, you know, I had to get on here tonight and touch on this particular topic, because, you know, I am of the belief we're spinning our wheels in mud. We cannot ignore the issue of race. We cannot continue to say that race is, it has to be fixed, but we're still carrying on the badges of slavery that psychologically keeps us at the bottom. So long as these people feel that they are superior, they are going to keep pushing to keep us under their heel. Look at your skin. That's all you have to do. Because I am of the opinion that we can scream until we are blue in the face. If we are not equally tackling the issue of this racial classification system in America, we will by default remain at the bottom. I simply challenge anyone to prove otherwise. And in that, Prove that we are black and that they are white. You know, some people are uncomfortable with us in this space. As many who are pushing to be recognized as a separate, distinct group are uncomfortable within this particular space as well, because this space has spaces within it. But I mean, we're here now and we're adding to, and in many instances, elevating the conversation by peeling back many of the layers needed so that we can be successful in our undertakings. And you know, I wanted to come on here tonight and have this conversation about race because I think that it's important. My brother Josh is in the building. Chime in, brother Josh.
Peace, family, peace. Yeah, man. Very much important and needed conversation about the racial classification system, man. You went in on the history of that thing.
Honest, bro.
Yeah, I think a lot of people did not know how deep that went into. You went into Blumenbach and you know, man, you went into ancient Roman and Moorish etymology. You know, that was key for people to understand and to be used in the future. You know, some of the stuff that you laid out is ammunition, and you know, you just kind of threw people some clips so they can just put in their back pocket. So um, when it's time to use that particular gun, you know, in the verbal war, they'll have the ammunition necessary. So what I wanted to do, just to add to what you were saying, is to bring, you know, because I feel like the perspective that you came from is like the fact that we need to dismantle the racial classification system, and that goes both ways. That means we need to therefore remove whiteness as a classification that the descendants of the children of Europe get to stand on, to make them white. They have a superior status, and we need to ourselves be willing to give up the position of blackness. And I would say I agree to that. I agree to that from the standpoint of, you know, that classification system is faulty. You already poked all the holes and shot all the holes through it. And we also understand that the reason why, even if we decide, if we call for like that to be dismantled, as far as stop using those terminologies, that's only part of the battle, because, excuse me, because the terminologies in reality are made manifest via the laws that are in place, via the system that's set up. The whole, and I would say the system, I'm not talking about just government. I'm talking about the economic system. I'm talking about the people who hold and wield and move the levers of power. I'm talking about the people who hold the wealth. I'm talking about the fact that we are a bottom caste, not just, to be bottom casted is not just, it's not something that's just in our mind. That's also something that's solidified by, like I said, the systems, the policies, and just the wealth that's held not in our hands. You know what I mean? That we do not will. I think it's. Go ahead.
I didn't mean to cut your wisdom. I just want to address this real quick, because this was a part of the debates that I used to have back in the days on this subject of blackness. James Brown said, I'm black and I'm proud, right? I'm like, but that doesn't mean you're black because James Brown made a song. So look, we understand what that means, right? There's a struggle attached with the name. There's a history attached with it. But equally, it is, in my opinion, and I think I've laid out my case tonight, it is psychologically one of the things that they use to keep us down. We think about it. You look at your brown skin, right? You look at your brown skin and you say that it is black. We say it. We say we have black skin. Brother Ali Bey joining us. We say that we have black skin. How? Right? How is it that we look at ourselves? You see the Chinese and the Japanese, and they got offended by being called yellow. The American Indians got offended by being called red. That's why you don't see that in the racial classifications no more.
Exactly.
You see what I'm saying? Yeah.
Yeah. I was gonna say, go ahead, Ali. What's up, Ali? Good to see you on.
What's good, man? What's good, y'all?
Peace, bro.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a football team, the Washington Redskins. They've been fighting against that Redskin label for a while. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, because they were saying that it was offensive. And remember the Asian woman that she was a representative from New York, was an Asian woman who she what did she do with it was a piece of federal legislation that had been in place for a while, and she fought to have the Oriental and Negro, I think it was Oriental and Negro, if I'm not mistaken, she had removed. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
That's why they don't use Oriental no more.
That's why they don't use Oriental anymore. That's right. It's offensive. All of this stuff was designed to be offensive. It would. Let me say this real quick, because this was some of the more of the slack that the Moors got, because they couldn't see outside of the racial parameters that was set up by white supremacists in this nation. So it says, can you define black? It says black according to science means death, right? That's not Noble Drew Ali saying that. He's saying according to science. Naturally, when things die, there's putrefaction, there's disintegration, all of these different things happen, and the thing starts to turn black. We see that with bananas, right? They start getting really, really dark after a while. It's dying. It's a thing plucked from its life source. In the same lessons, it says, what title does Satan give himself? God. Then the very next question and answer says, well, will you define white? And it reads, white means purity. White means God. God means purity. I'm saying
white means purity. Purity means God.
God
and God is the ruler of the land, right? And God is the ruler of the land. Real quick, think about that. These people are not white. They don't have white skin. This is something that they called themselves. And this is how they defined it. They defined themselves as God, that they were pure, that we were impure. So much so that if you had a drop of quote unquote Negro blood within you, you were contaminated. You were octoroon or quadroon or whatever. These are terms. So in essence, they said that we're God. And so long as you recognize us as white people, we will perpetually be your God. So long as you recognize yourselves as something that you're not. Black folks.
Let me say this to the people. The use of the different terminologies for blackness, you can get this going back into even the Arab speakers when they called a certain portion of Africa Bilad al-Sudan. The word Sudan is the root word of the word Sudan is the word Sud, S-U-D. The word Sud means black or blacken. If you look up the definition of Sud, right, in the Arabic, it means to blacken, right? It's actually a verb meaning to blacken. When you blacken something, it's synonymous with denigration, right? So I want people to do this.
Denigration.
Look up the term denigrate, in which and you're going to see that to denigrate means to blacken. But so
here's
when go ahead.
No, go ahead, because I know if you I'm gonna see if you're going to touch on that point. Go ahead.
So what they did was what they were doing was denigrating the people by quote unquote blackening them. At the same time, the so-called Romance speakers that come into Africa later, they, instead of saying Bilad al Sudan, what they did was they named that portion of the land Negro land. You can look that up on the map, and you'll see that these speakers of the so-called Romance language, like the Portuguese and Spaniards, they on their maps, cartographers called the place Negro land. And so we get this Negro, which the brother broke down already in terms of the etymology and its root is it being rooted in Niger. But this was their way of using their language as opposed to Sudan. They said Negro. They said Negro, or the Negro land is what they did. And so these are all forms of denigration.
Let me. I want you to continue. Let me just read the etymology real quick of denigrate, right? Because let me pull up Sister Cynthia's comment, because she said denigration, right? And yeah, if you can hear that word, but peep what the etymology says for denigrate. 1520s, to sully or stain, the reputation, character, etc. From Latin denigratus, past participle of denigrare, to blacken, to defame, from D, completely, plus Niger, the stem of Niger, black, C, Negro, and again it says of unknown origin. So this word denigrate is rooted in the word Negro. It didn't. Come on, people.
But see, they're saying Niger and Negro are related. Yo, click on Negro. Click on Negro for a second. Okay. Let's see what they say about it.
A member of a black-skinned race of Africa, from Spanish or Portuguese, Negro, black, from Latin, Niger. I don't understand why they're saying Niger is of unknown origin. That baffles me.
Well, Niger is of unknown origin, but Negro is what the word Negro is supposed to come from Niger.
That's what I'm saying. That's why it doesn't make any sense, because it says right here, Portuguese, Negro, black, from Latin, nigrum, nominative, Niger, which they have as black, dark, sable, dusky. So I don't understand why the etymologists use that term. Was at the bottom it says this. All right, let's go here. As an adjective from 1590s, used with the capital N, became general early 20th century. New York Times 1930 style book in reference to U.S. citizens of African descent, but because of its perceived association with white imposed attitudes and roles, the word was ousted late 1960s in the sense by black. Remember, black was a term. You hear people in the streets and they say, "With your black ass," right? With his black ass. Like that was a way to like really curse somebody or defame them by using
denigrate them,
right, to sully them, oh man, these people. This is the psychology of blackness. So let's go down to this bottom part. It says meaning African American vernacular. The English language is spoken by U.S. blacks is from 1704. French negre is a 16th century borrowing from Spanish negro. Older English words were Moor and blackamoor. A Middle English word for Ethiopian, perhaps also a Negro, generally was blue man. Now, even with Moor or blackamoor, if any of you are familiar with my research on this topic, you'll note where I unequivocally show that during the post-classical antiquity period, where you get the Hellenistic language called the Koine language, or what they call the Alexandrian tongue, there's a merging of this word.
That's Greek. That's what they call
Greek. Greek. It's called Greek. So you get this the name Moor for our people, right? Maphros in the Greek becomes black only in this period. It becomes cognate only with this name black. And if you research this period, this is when Ptolemy II links up with the practitioners that are called Jews today, who write the Septuagint, the 72 books, and they begin to frame the ideas that Greek thought start to have, particularly when it comes to our people. I've done a lot of research on this. So,
yep. So what I like to do, though, is because we know that the imposition of terms or misnomers like black, Negro, colored, African even. And this is what, and it's interesting, before I make the actual point I'm trying to make, just to go back to the thing that, remember the conversation we were having with Jam when she came on. And I was explaining to her that the people that were brought from that continent weren't Africans. I said they were not Africans. And I actually made a post about it in the Be the Power Facebook group, breaking down the actual tribal or ethnic names of the people that they brought here. So you'll see that these people names were Hausa, they were Wolof, they were Fulani, Fulbe, they were Mande or Mandinka, they were Yoruba, they were Igbo, some of them, well, I said Hausa already, some of them were Timne, some of them, et cetera, right? They had their own names, right? None of them were quote unquote African. And so there's a couple of, proffered etymologies for the word African. The one that I lean towards the most, and I know about, we found the one about the king from Arabia, Felix, Malik Yafrik from Arabia, Felix. The one I lean towards the most, only because it shows a little bit more in terms of a historical sense, is the idea that the term was something used for the province, the Roman province of Africa Proconsularis for one, and then a few other ones after they defeated the Carthaginians and the Moors in the northern portion of what I think is Libya. Today is called Libya, but the Carthaginian wars, where they defeated them in the Third Punic War, and called the land of these particular tribes of Berbers or Moorish people, called Afri or Afur, whichever one. The Ika or the CA or the ICA, denoting the land or the land of this particular people that they defeated. This time around, they fought 3 different wars, and they finally won this war and made what they called Africa Roman Province. You guys can look this up. Google Africa Roman Province, or Africa Proconsularis, right? And you can break it down and see that consular is part of it's pro plus consular, right? And so these are the provinces. This was one of the provinces that was established. There's a number of Roman African provinces that was established once they defeated the Carthaginians and the Moors. So these people weren't African. Africa is something that they, some kind of way, that name wound up encompassing the entire continent, when originally it was really designated for the Roman provinces of the places that became the Roman territories. And after, I don't know, maybe you got research on that, bro. I don't know how the name Africa wound up spreading across the entire continent like that. But at some point, obviously it did, because it's not a word that's rooted in any specific language that we can find. That's why it's hard to pinpoint the etymology, because no particular tribe or people claims to have come up with that word. None of the people on that continent ever take credit for coming up with the word Africa. So as far as I can tell, it's a terminology that was constructed by Romans after they defeated the Carthaginians and the Moors. So I'm just saying to say, because in American records, we're called blacks, We call Negroes, we call colored people, we call people of color, persons of color, as well as Ethiopians, as well as Africans. And all of those are actually names that are imposed on our people who had their own names that they came with. They had their own names. And this is what I was explaining to Jan. But what I like to do, the point that I was trying to make, is that I like to do reverse psychology. So a lot of y'all might see me spelling the word white a specific way. And I've even had people ask me, why you keep spelling the word like that? Are you, I spell the word, some of y'all might notice this. I always spell the word white, W-I-G-H-T. That's not an accident, right? Because I understand that to blacken somebody is to denigrate them. I get that. Right. So what I want to do is reverse the psychology. I'm into turning everything on its head at this point. Let's flip everything on its head. That's why you'll hear me talk about slaves were technically citizens, because I want to turn everything on its head. So when you see me spelling the word white, W-I-G-H-T, I want you to look up that word and look up the images. Look up the images that come with the word white, and you'll understand why I'm always using that as opposed to W-H-I-T-E, because W-H-I-T-E to them means purity. Purity means God. God means the ruler of the land. So what do we have to do? Reverse the psychology and flip everything on his head. So instead of W-H-I-T-E, it's W-I-G-H-T. Y'all look up W-I-G-H-T and look up the images that come with it. Go ahead, bro.
Hey, so Ali, so what you're saying is you're not denigrating them, you're de-wig-grading them.
All of that.
But that's what you got to do so that they can see just how terrible this thing has been done. But see, it's been done for so long. It's almost like, well, most people don't know this. They've never seen it from this perspective. They've never studied the etymology. They just used to using the terms. Yes. They're used to us still wearing the badges of slavery. They're used to us being denigrating, and that being just the only way to identify us in our whole entire experience here. And
yes,
they're used to their choice of identity being the most exalted, the most high, the pure, the rule of the land, the God status in that hierarchy. Well, it takes you flipping that and denigrating or de-wig-grading that status for them to see how we've been done and how we still being done today.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
That's right, Josh. That's absolutely
so anybody who think that that's just an appalling thing he said he's been doing, no, you got to look at it. That's the same thing they've been doing to us since day one, since we didn't touch the land, before we didn't touch the land. Or you can say you want to take it back to 1774 or 1779, whatever. They've been using when was the first one they first started using Negro?
I think it's like 15. What did it say? 1590, I believe it said.
Mm-hmm. So we've been denigrated since 1500 something, right?
Right. It's
so
like
if
calling
you think that's appalling
bitch
for him to use W-I-G-H-T, just understand that started in 2020 by Ali Bey. Whereas we've been denigrated since 1520.
1520.
Exactly. Think about how it is. You know how the sisters be like, don't be like back in the day, be like, don't call me out my name. Don't call. So this is what they were doing all of this time, because they didn't give a damn about you calling yourself Hausa. They didn't give a damn about you calling yourself Mandingo, Mandinka, any of that stuff. They said, you know what? I don't care about none of that. What you are is a Negro nigga, right? That's it. A Negro, nigga, black, colored, whatever we say you are, that's what you are.
Animal.
All of them names, all them names you had, be damned. We don't care about that. You are what we say you are. And because we've been cut off from all of those things, the knowledge of all of those different names and intermixed the various tribes of people that were brought here intermixed with each other. So you got multiple lineages going back to various ethnic groups in West Africa. We did our family DNA, multiple places that our DNA traces back to in West Africa, as well as some European, as well as even some Native American, believe it or not. So our group is a very mixed group. It's a very mixed new tribe of people here that have multiple lineages that are going to take you to different groups of people in West Africa. And at this point in time, it's very hard for us to pinpoint any specific group. We have tons and tons of grandparents. The further back you go, the more grandparents you have each generation. What is it like? You have 4 grandparents, 8 great grandparents, 16 great grandparents. And so think about that, man. The further back, and so it's like it'll be damn near impossible to pinpoint any specific tribe to say I'm from this one particular tribe of people. We're a mixed group at this point because of slave breeding and just the fact that we've commingled with each other, multiple ethnic groups commingling with each other. You got European ancestry, Native, all of this stuff. So because we've been cut off from all of the knowledge of the specificity of the tribes, the ethnic names that were brought, we wind up clinging to the very things that the European imposed on us, Black, Negro, colored, and we try to find pride in that, which is fine, right? But for me, the one thing that those terminologies do is they serve as evidence of the denigration. They serve as evidence of the fact that they stripped our people of everything that was rightfully theirs, even their own names. Like the brother said, we've been robbed of even our names. We've been robbed of everything. So the fact that Black and Negro and colored are part of the criteria lets you know that those things are actually evidences of the imposition of white domination, terrorism, and all kinds of things. Remember that scene from Roots? This was one of the most powerful scenes that stood out for me for years. And I know a lot of people like Roots was a fake story, but it's based on real incidences. Remember when they had Kunta Kinte strung up and they was trying to force him to accept the name Toby?
Mm-hmm.
And they were beating him, right? Whipping him until he actually said the name Toby, right? Because he tried to hang on to Kunta as long as he could, but they finally broke him. So at the end of the day, that scene was representative of what happened to the larger group in terms of how they renamed everybody. It's not just an individual thing where we're renaming people Toby, or we're going to call you Charles, or we're going to call you Henry, or whatever the case is. They renamed the entire group's name to Negro, Black, colored, all of this. And then they took on the name white for themselves, because white is not their name either. Those people, if you look at the records that you're going to see in colonial America, the original white man was actually called an Englishman or a Christian. Those were the two names that they were known by, Englishman or Christian. And the original white man was an Englishman. They started to broaden and expand who was considered white. And we talk about how the Irish became white, but a whole bunch of people became white, not just the Irish. You know the history of whiteness, you'll realize that the Germans became white. A whole bunch of people that were not considered white in their countries of origin come to the United States and become white here. Part of it is to maintain a sense of dominance and this idea of a white majority over the people of African and native descent here.
And that's what this is about. I want to add, and now today in 2020 America, there's a whole lot of new groups that have became white that are not even of European descent. You know, like you've seen other brown whites now.
Yes.
People accessing the hierarchy of whiteness. you know, the
That's right.
apex, or in some instances surpassing whiteness, you know, um, because they're not coming to lean on whiteness as far as blackness being the floor. They're coming up to lean on whiteness as far as to even have whiteness being the floor, you know. That's why you see the Indian American. I mean, look. If anybody, somebody came on on our program last time talking some crazy stuff about talking about xenophobia. Look, understand this is not this is not like you have to get in reality. You know, we're Americans and we're American citizens, and we have the right to want to shape our government in the way we see fit, and especially us being the foundational Americans, especially us being the most disadvantaged and historically citizens who citizens who went through some hell over here and who's owed $1 trillion debt. We have the right to want to make this country in a position that helps us catch at least the worst case scenario is a baseline to catch up, right? To catch up to all the other groups. Not and really we need to be way past some other groups. If other groups, Asian groups, one generation in, 2 generations in, can come and almost lap white people, why in the world we can't? You know. So all I'm saying is like people want to hit us with these wild claims of look. You have to get in reality of the situation in America, and that is like be made we have to be made whole, and we have to be put in a position to where when we look at our group, you know, we're surpassing whiteness, you know, because we're not
Yes.
we're supposed to be the ones surpassing and lapping and doubling white, especially when you think about it, we the ones that built up whiteness. Whiteness wouldn't even have no claim to fame if it wasn't for the Negro producing all the wealth, all the ideas. I think our people will be even looked at as at a much different stature if we were able to. If it was, I know this could never happen. If it was some kind of way where we could quantify the exact contributions that we made, and if we were able to go and get intellectual property rights for the inventions and all the things that we did and have that on the books, and you would see so much more that we have contributed to this country, and
Facts.
that's just not on the record now. That's just not on the record,
Right.
so we don't get the glory, and the
Mm-hmm.
descendants of those people don't get. You know, I was listening to the brother Antonio Moore earlier,
Mm-hmm.
and he was talking. He brought out a statistic. He said, um, white 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 I think it's white people make up 90% of the CEOs in America. Well, that's interesting because they make up 90% of the wealth.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
know, so that's an
Mm-hmm.
interesting correlation. I don't know if he put those together, but I thought that was an interesting correlation. And
Yeah.
if you think about, you know, the fact that I think in Darity's book he talked about Nike alone is like 100. If just Nike's revenue alone, I believe it's like the top 100 black corporations or something. I can't remember. But y'all go read that from here to equality, man. I was just
Yeah.
skimming through that, and I was like, man, this is
I
some
know he said that
amazing.
about Walmart.
Yeah,
Oh
Walmart. I
yeah.
think he said Walmart is like half of black business. Walmart revenue is half of black revenue total or something.
Wow. Well,
You know.
I remember him saying in a couple of interviews I saw, he said that the money what black businesses bring in combined, and when we say black business, we're talking all black businesses, which will include Oprah Winfrey's business, Jay-Z's business, Michael Jordan's business, Robert Smith, whoever. The combined revenue of all black businesses equals to about a third of what Walmart brings in. a third.
Hmm.
That's freaking insane, man.
Oh yeah. Did you want to touch on these slides, Ali?
After about 1680, taking the colonies as a whole, a new term appeared, white, Theodore W. Allen. What was the next one?
This one right here. I don't have the page numbers on these.
That's fine.
Yeah.
During my own study of page after page of Virginia County records, reel after reel of microfilm prepared by the Virginia Colonial Records Project and other 17th century sources, I have found no instance of the official use of the word white as a token of social status before its appearance in a Virginia law passed in 1691, referring to English or other white women.
All right, let's go to the next one.
Hold on. Can I just, because I brought up Nike. I just pulled up the Dirty piece real quick. Can I just read?
Okay. Yeah.
Josh.
Sound like you went out.
Yeah. Did you want to go over this
Give
slide?
it. Yeah. While he's
And we
getting
have
it.
a question in the chat.
Yes. Let's go to the question.
All right.
Can y'all hear me?
Hold on one second. Is a national descent name necessary for reparations? It is commonly believed that you have to be a distinct nation to be
I think he means
repaired. Well, a national descent name. Here's the interesting thing, right? Because it's coming from the MSC of A of Alabama. When Drew Ali mentions national descent name, right? The way that I read that literature, the national descent name for us would be American, right? That's just one thing. Now, we can go further with that if you want to start talking about descent names from other African names or other Native American names. If you want to do that, you can. But for me, in terms of this particular body politic and us being foundational to it, our national descent name, as far as I'm concerned, and as far as our relationship to this body politic is concerned, is American. And the reason that that's important for me is because that's the entity. The United States of America is the entity that we're going to have to seek this particular justice from. Japanese Americans, their national descent name is not Japanese. Japanese is an ethnic name for them as citizens of the United States. Their descent name is American, just like ours. You understand? So this is one of the things that has to be understood. National names, once you leave your nation or country of origin politically, once you sever political ties, come to another nation and gain citizenship, those national names then become ethnic names. It's not a national name anymore, because if you're talking from a political perspective, that national name is now your ethnic name. So when you go to look up various ethnicities in the United States, you can Google this, a list of ethnicities in the United States. What you're going to see is Japanese American is now an ethnic name. It's not a national name for them. The national name is American, right? Because United States of America is the nation, and America is used as the demonym, as if you will, for the citizens of the United States. Some people will argue that, I know, because of South and Central America, etc. But
that's a stupid argument.
But the point is, the citizens of the United States are the people who are known as Americans by everybody else around the world. So if you said to somebody in Nigeria the name Americans, they're going to automatically think citizens of the United States. If you say to Russians the word Americans, they're going to think citizens of the United States. Everybody relates the term American with citizen of the United States. So it's synonymous with that for everybody around the world. Now, so the point is, If you look up a list of ethnic names or ethnicities in the United States, what you're going to
I have,
see right now,
I
the
have it
brothers running
pulled up.
through them. You see all of those names like Chinese, which was a national name if you're a citizen of China, now becomes an ethnic name when you're in the United States. Chinese American, Pakistani American. Pakistani is a national name for an actual Pakistani who is a citizen or subject or whatever however their government is set up of Pakistan. But in the United States, those become ethnic names. So you could show them if you want some of those things, you know.
Oh yeah. I mean, just running through this whole thing.
Indian American,
Americans like Bangladeshi Americans,
Bangladeshi,
Chinese Americans, which include Taiwanese people, Chinese Americans excluding Taiwanese people, which I think is interesting. Then they give Taiwanese Americans their own designation. Hold up, I don't think we ever looked at this deep enough. This is interesting.
Filipino Americans. What else they got?
I don't know what a Hmong American is.
An Indonesian American. What is it? Korean American,
Japanese, Korean, Laotian, Pakistani, Thai, Vietnamese, Burmese. So these, as Brother Ali was explaining, are ethnic names. And let me add on to that that question. Look, I understand. I remember tweeting at Dr. Darity. This was months ago. About it could have even been before we started Be the Power. There was somebody, I believe they were being interviewed on Fox News, and it was about the issue of reparations. And this woman spoke about how America paid nations reparations. And I thought that it was interesting. And while I didn't take a definite position like I would have some years ago when I was in the Moorish movement, I believe my tweet says something to the effect of this is something that basically needs to be looked at, that these people have a specific designation. And if we take tonight's program and we break down the psychology of Blackness, and we look at Black American from one psychological standpoint to a socio-political standpoint as this construct, this creature of legislation, it makes you understand the question, right? It's not something that you dismiss and say, well, because the question is a fair question, as opposed to someone saying, well, if you don't claim yourself as this and you call yourself Black, then you're not going to get it, which is not necessarily the truth. Because as Brother Ali Bey has pointed out in the past, there are states that have come up with reparations programs that were targeted for Black Americans or African Americans or former Negroes or colored folk, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a discussion that's worth having. It's definitely.
Well, let me add this. For the purposes of reparations for slave labor and subsequent Jim Crowism, but specifically for Negro, what was called Negro chattel slavery in the United States, here's something that works extremely well as a designator. And I'm not saying a name for a people, but a designator that describes the people you're talking about and what actually happened. American descendants of slavery. That designation is perfect for what we're talking about and who we're describing. Americans that are descendants of the institution of Negro chattel slavery. And some people say you can't descend from an institution, right? I know that's been an argument. You can't descend from an institution. But we're saying out of that institution came this new tribe of people who were called Negroes, blacks, colors, African Americans, whatever, Moorish Americans, whatever, right? Because even the original Moorish Americans from the early 1900s are American descendants of slavery by and large. There may have been some other people there, but by and large, you're talking about American descendants of slavery. And like the brother is, you don't need a specific name. You have to prove a lineage. And that is exactly the claim. Thank you, brother Ish. That is exactly the claim of the ADOS movement, is because at the end of the day, what you have to do is prove the lineage. That's why the criteria was established by Dr. Darity, which I think is genius. It's genius. And so the criteria takes care of that. And I know there were people who had problems with the criteria, like the dude Reggie and other people like that. But he's irrelevant. But he's kind of like a symptom of other things. The ideas of other people. He's not alone in that sentiment. So the point is, the criteria established by Dr. Darity, which I think is genius, takes care of a lot of the problems. And I think that's why a lot of people have such a problem with the criteria, because they realize what that thing is going to do. It's going to cut through a lot of the BS that we've had to deal with in terms of who was a descendant of slave. You see, white people ask that question because they know that there are other black people in this country besides descendants of slaves. They know that there are Nigerians here. They know that there are people here from the Caribbean. You understand what I'm saying? They know that there are people here like Kamala Harris who are claiming to be black that aren't black in the sense of their descendants of Negro chattel slavery in America pre-1865. They know all of that. That's why they ask those questions, so that they could jam everybody up and jam the whole process up and say this is impossible to figure out. We tie the whole thing up in knots and say this is impossible to figure out. Nobody knows the answer. But see, the criteria was genius. It's genius, and it's going to untangle all of that stuff. And again, the designation, American descendants of slavery, it describes who we're talking about. We are Americans that descend from the institution of Negro chattel slavery. Out of that institution was birthed this new tribe of people, an amalgamated group of people, of West Africans, Native Americans, and Europeans. We're an amalgamated group. We got to be honest. We're a new tribe of people. Out of that institution came us. And so us, as a new tribe of American citizens, are the descendants of that institution that created us, largely shaped who we are. So for me, that designation, I wouldn't say that's our name, but that designation actually describes who we are and what happened. And it talks about, like the brother said, the lineage. It helps us to understand that this is a lineage-based issue. Go ahead, brother Josh. I know you want to say something.
Yeah, I wanted to say a couple of things. I don't know if you can bring that article up before I get into the article. I just want to say a couple of things building on what you said. Yeah, I mean, so we spent this episode talking about the fact that there was a lot of problems with using the term black to describe us. We talked about how it was a process of making us inferior, start with the inferior position in society and the social hierarchy. We talked about, and so basically, if you were looking like, well, yeah, you talked about the problem, what's the solution? Well, I think part of the solution is to correct that by using a descriptive term that describes our lineage, that describes how we were denigrated, right? Without attaching us to that in perpetuity. We're describing what we descend from. We're not describing what we are. I think that's the difference. When we say our American descendants of slavery, we're ADOS, we're talking about what we descend from. We're not saying this is what we currently are. We're not saying we're currently a black people. We're not saying we're currently a Sullen. What is it? We're not soot. We're not the devil. You know what I'm saying? We're not saying that we are that. We're saying we descend from people who were casted into being made a devil and being made inferior. So I think that distinction is necessary and relevant for today.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And and I think it does another thing. It helps our politics moving forward, you know, because when you're saying that we're descendants of slavery and that we refuse it any longer to be this bottom caste, it signifies that we're rising up. It signifies that we're rising up, and it is what's built into that is we're over the debt. So that's how you have to anchor a reparations movement. That's all we're moving for. That's why nobody's seen anything like this ever in terms of reparations, because nobody has taken what we call blackness and acknowledged it and saying we're not that anymore. We come from blackness, and we want justice for being made to be a black people, and we want the system that holds us to be black to be dismantled. And the way you dismantle that is you tear up the floor. You know, we're the floor, so tear up the floor. We don't want to be the floor no more. Put us as wood to build the rest of the house. You know, it's like everybody else. Let us. We're not gonna be the floor to be walked on. We're gonna be able to. Somebody else gonna have to be the floor. Yes, it may be some of us gonna be the floor. Allow us to participate in America to the point where we can see if we're gonna have anybody that's gonna be in the low part of the class system. You know what I mean? And I think another thing that ADOS does is it gives us the space to unify, because y'all can claim whatever kind of historical thing you want to claim in antiquity and whatever type of religious ideology you have. But guess what? If you come from this lineage, it gives us something all to unify and fight for together. And we can put some other stuff to the side, whether for however temporary or how long we need to. Because a lot of the stuff that we may be having issues with is not even relevant, or probably wouldn't be relevant if we were not all fighting for scarce resources, if we were not all trying to find a solution to like fixing some of the issues that we have. And a lot of those issues that we have are from being made into be a bottom caste, from being made to be poor, from dealing with trauma that comes with growing up in a disadvantaged situation. You know what I'm saying?
That's right.
And there's a lot of work that the federal government should have the responsibility on to fix what it damaged, that our people have had to form all kind of groups to try to fix, and don't have the capacity to do such, you know? So yeah, and if you can bring up that article.
All right, hold on. Right. Ali, you want to jump in? I want to touch on something real quick.
No, I agree with everything the brother Josh just said, man. You know, 100%. 100%.
I'm gonna bring it up, Josh. I just want to get to this before we get to, because this was a part of something that I wanted to touch on tonight. And this is coming from the book White by Law. Again, everybody get this book. It is crucial. It is crucial. But I want to read something real quick. And it centers around Chinese people and blackness. And I just thought that this was something that needed to be brought out on this particular stream tonight. Hold on. All right. It says this. This is from pages 36 and 37. Let me see. It says some immigrant groups, for example, the Chinese, were initially characterized as black, suggesting that for some, attempting to naturalize a white person was the more difficult route. According to Ronald Takaki, the Chinese migrants found that racial qualities previously assigned to blacks quickly became Chinese characteristics. White workers referred to the Chinese as naggers or nagers, and the magazine cartoon depicted the Chinese as a blood-sucking vampire with slanted eyes, a pigtail, dark skin, and thick lips. I've seen those cartoons over the years. Like blacks, the Chinese were described as heathen, morally inferior, savage, childlike, and lustful. Unsurprisingly, this early social treatment of the Chinese as akin to blacks also found legal expression. For example, in the 1854 case, People versus Hall, the California Supreme Court heard the appeal of a white defendant challenging his conviction for murder. He appealed on the grounds that he was convicted only through the testimony of a Chinese witness, and that this testimony should have been excluded under an 1850 statute, providing that no black or mulatto person or Indian shall be allowed to give evidence in favor of or against the white man. These people is crazy. The court agreed with the defendant that the Chinese witness was barred from testifying by the 1850 statute, reasoning that Indians originally migrated from Asia, and so all Asians were conversely also Indian, and that at any rate, black was a generic term encompassing all non-whites, and thus included Chinese persons. We could go on for about 30, 40 minutes on that.
The whims of white. This is the whims of white men. We've been subjected to the whims of white men, and that's basically what it's been. The courts are some of the most non-democratic places within the government structure. And the courts have been used as the playground for racist devils to execute and undergird all of their sick psychological BS that they wanted to impose on everybody.
Let me read this, and then we're gonna finish the discussion. Then Josh, I'm gonna pull that article up. But I just thought this was so important. The legal equation of Chinese and black status was not temporally or geographically unique. 3/4 of a century later, and across the country, Mississippi Supreme Court reached a similar decision, holding in 1925 that school segregation laws targeting the colored race barred children of Chinese descent from attending schools for white children. Given their social and legal Negroization, it may well have been easier for the Chinese and other immigrants to argue their qualification for citizenship as blacks rather than as whites. This shows how fallacious the construct of black and white as racial classifications are.
And it shows you how blackness is used as a form of denigration. When they blacken people, they're actually denigrating them. My bad. Go ahead.
All right.
That's why they rather use people of color now.
That's right. That's right. I mean, we could. There's so much to get into just on this alone, right? Because Chinese were they didn't go through slavery, but in the early 1900s they faced certain discrimination, but they had China as their backing, and eventually America didn't look at Chinese in the same way that they looked at us, so they were able to form Chinatowns from New York all the way to the West Coast. Thriving.
Didn't they become the model minorities?
Basically, I believe that's a quote somewhere.
Yeah, that's right? From Here to Equality. He talks about that in there. The model minorities.
It says that no immigrants adopted this strategy, talking about trying to become citizens as blacks rather than as whites, may reflect the naturalization statute's geographic emphasis in defining blacks. The 1870 Act referred to persons of, quote, African nativity or African descent, end quote, rather than to black persons. By way of comparison, the naturalization statute referred to white persons rather than to persons of European ancestry. So we got to switch a rule there. I don't want to kind of touch on that more than to stress the Chinese point, but this whole page, this whole book is so important. So let me just get to this part, right? It says, in addition, however, it seems nearly certain that the social stigma and harsh discrimination imposed on those with Black status discouraged applicants for citizenship from seeking admission on that basis. So then Black was a status. Immigrants to this country quickly learned the value of being white rather than Black, and thereby learned to cast themselves as white. No doubt, peep that, right? Because we have a lot of people that's trying. We have an Asian in a community, I believe that was in California a couple of weeks ago, that approaches a brother and said, y'all know I can't stand this word, but we don't want you niggas here. This Chinese dude.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Yep.
I think it was in Arizona or something.
Arizona,
like
plugging into whiteness, right? So it says, no doubt this lesson influenced many immigrants' decision to apply for citizenship as a white person. These conjectures illustrate that at issue is the complicated process by which races are fashioned, not a simple procedure by which applicants are slotted into transcendent categories. The prerequisite opinions do not record the facile recognition of racial difference, but rather the convoluted processes through which race is socially and legally constructed. And I want to bring this up real quick, and y'all go in on it as what I started off with, right? And this is from the same book. This is from the same book where it says that races are not biologically differentiated groupings, but rather social constructs. And he says, because this is the solution to the problem, he says, I conclude, this is the author, I conclude that whiteness exists at the vortex of race in U.S. law and society, and that whites should renounce their racial identity as it is currently constituted in the interests of social justice. So instead of saying defund the police, right? How about we scream, stop calling yourselves white, change or scream, change the racial classifications. Then, but there's the obverse. There's the obverse to this issue. And wait, I gotta go in. I gotta touch on this point, right? Before y'all come in. I have to read this from the same book, page 21. And he's citing this man named Richard Ford, who he says advances a psychospatial version of this point, this mirroring, right? It says, in order for the concept of a white race to exist, there must be a Black race, which is everything the white race is not. Red, of course, does not want to be associated with. Thus, the most debased stereotypical attributes of the quote-unquote Black savage are none other than the guilty projections of white society. This white self-regard is at the root of race bigotry in all its forms. It is not a fear of the other, but a fear and loathing of the self. It is not so much that the construction of Blackness that which matters. It is the construction of whiteness as the absence of those demons the white subject must project onto the other. That quote is so powerful, because if you eliminate Blackness, you eliminate whiteness, and vice versa. If you eliminate whiteness, you eliminate Blackness, because these two things they're figments of the imagination. They do not exist outside of us giving it power. What do you have to say to that?
Let me say something about that. So, what's interesting is now, again, in America today, and you touched on it as far as immigrants, they're able to come, and then particularly Indians and Chinese and some of the other E's from Asia, they're able to come and transcend even whiteness or leap over top of whiteness and within a single generation. Now we know a lot of times that is due to
Josh,
successful,
cut out.
wealthy.
Oh, there you
Uh,
go.
yeah, we know a lot of times that has something to do with how they have selectivity in bringing in those who may be wealthy, high class, high education, or whatever the case may be. But we still have to acknowledge that, like, even if you break up whiteness, it's not necessarily gonna. It doesn't necessarily mean you're doing something to where only people who are looked to be of European descent um, should stop calling themselves white, or should. What we're talking about is breaking up a system to where um, you know every like there. Let me say this: you have to with the common denominator of the common denominator is of this situation is blackness or ADOSness is at the bottom. That's the common down. So what I'm trying to say is there's a whole lot of groups that can come over and access whiteness, right? And even transcend. But there's there's no other group that's really coming to access and to be casted at the bottom other than ADOS right now. You some people might say, well, some Latinos and stuff like, well, we talking about, for the most part, refugees and people that's coming across the border illegally. That's a totally different situation
Mm-hmm.
than, being foundational to the country, or somebody that's coming, through a legal immigration process, or outside of being some type of refugee status. But think about what you would be comparing to us. You're talking about illegal people just losing everything that's coming from a poverty situation, or that's coming from a desperation situation, that's fleeing for their lives, or that's risking their lives to get over here. Comparing that, and you putting that on the same footing of people who've been over here for generations. So I guess what I was trying to say was, again, dismantling whiteness. I think we have to fix blackness first of all. You dismantle blackness, then if everybody is accessing whiteness, it ain't white no more. You know,
Mm,
it
mm.
ain't white no more.
That's a good point.
That's
That is
right.
a good point.
But
That's
the
right.
only way it stays white is if ADOS can't access it.
Right. Yeah, I think part of dismantling whiteness is like the man said, them renouncing it and what it stands for, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I'm of the mindset that anybody who identifies as white is the devil, right? And I don't mean that from the perspective of any kind of religious thing. I mean devil or Satan in the sense of an adversary,
Mm-hmm.
because the whole point of establishing whiteness was to be adversarial.
Mm.
That was the whole purpose of it, is to be adversarial and to and for dominance of one group over another. So
That's
anybody
right.
that identifies that as a white person is actually a devil for anybody who is considered black. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to agree with that, but that's just the way I see it. That's the way I see it. And so part of it is, yes, they need to renounce it because it was set up to be an adversarial a position in society for us specifically. Number one, and number two, yes, they need to fix us. And part of taking apart whiteness is to fix the people that you've denigrated and held as a bottom caste and labeled as the black people in society. You fix those people, those black ones that descend from this illegal, unconstitutional institution that you established in this country. You fix those people, the descendants of those people, you'll start to eradicate whiteness. They don't have to just use words, they can use their actions to help eradicate
Mm,
whiteness.
mm.
Reparations.
There you go.
Hey, can you bring up that article? Yeah, I just thought this was interesting. I wanted to get y'all's take on this. You know, Congress takes crucial step towards establishing Latino and women's history museums. Wow.
Well, listen. I mean, I don't care. What's your thoughts on it? I don't really care
Well,
about that, man.
well, I just look at it like, we got the African American History and Culture Museum in that broke in Washington D.C. right here where I'm at, and when we saw that, it was like, wow, that's great that they did that. That's much needed, long overdue. But then but we're an actual group. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're an actual people who come from
An actual tribe. Yep.
we're an actual tribe. We're a specific group of people with a shared background and a shared experience in the country. When you look at Latino, what
There's
is that?
multiple
What does that
groups.
mean? It's a whole lot of groups. That's
Yeah.
a whole lot of
It's
groups
Puerto
with a
Ricans,
whole lot
it's
of
Mexicans, it's Cubans, it's are Colombians Latinos?
Mm-hmm.
It's
and
Colombians, it's
why
Dominicans, it's a whole bunch of different people.
and why is this a thing coming up now? It's almost like, well, the Negroes got it. We need to get something too. We can't just
Yep.
let them just be
Well, that's
standalone.
why.
And then women's history, hey, all right, but that's
But you
just
know what?
interesting, man.
I tell you this, man. I think it was Tariq Nasheed, man. I was listening to one night. He said something real interesting. He was talking about what he said something like, "What have white women ever done of significance in this country?" Let's really think about this. Like, what have the white women ever done of significance in this country? What have they added to society? And I was sitting there thinking about it for me. I'm like, damn, I can't even think of nothing. I can't think of nothing. Because you got to remember, white women, even though they were citizens, and see, this is a part of the research that I was doing for the project I was working on. White women were locked out of the rights of citizenship, the privileges and immunities of citizenship, just like black people were. White women actually didn't get the rights of suffrage until after black men.
Mm-hmm.
So they have been held at bay from the benefits of a lot of the benefits and rights and privileges and shit of citizenship, just like every other group of people. So when you start thinking about contributions, like, talking about women's history museum, I don't know what they're gonna put in there other than the suffrage movement and maybe the fact that some of them were slave owners or whatever. I don't what did they
Yeah,
contribute to Americans?
I'll be highly surprised if they include that they were her property angle up in there.
They should. I mean, that's part of
They
their
should.
history.
They should. And if they don't, hey, that's something we definitely gonna have to call them out on. Matter of fact, we need to be proactive in saying that they need to include that in that museum. Because it's
So
not about whether it's highlighting or making a group feel good or whatever. It's about telling the truth.
so can we think other than abortion clinics and like I mean, what can we think of can we think of like 5 things of significance that white women have contributed to? Like, we know what the sisters did with NASA, right? We know that the sisters contributed to the space program.
The lost cause. See, when you
Oh,
say significant,
okay.
we don't. You're not talking about whether it's good or bad. You just say significant. So significant, you got to say the lost cause. Hey, the daughters of the Confederacy.
That is true. That is true.
They
right
raised the
about that.
rulers of the land.
Yeah.
They nurtured and raised the rulers of the land. I mean,
They gave birth to all of the devils. That's a very significant thing. I guess you're right. Those are their sons, man. Hey, here's what it is. What are you gonna do?
Yeah, man. Look. I don't know. I ain't really got much to say. I ain't got much to say on that. People. I'm sure we want to. We could take some time. Maybe we can find. And I'm sure if they have this museum, they have enough
Yeah.
content to fill in there. But hey, man, look, we got to be honest with this thing. Like we can't separate. You can't separate whiteness out and attribute all the bad things to the white males through some type of
Right.
idea of patriarchy, and don't want to delve
That's right.
equal blame out to the other half of the quote unquote white race, which is the women. It's not like the women were
That's right.
the freedom fighters. It's not like the women were on the forefront pushing the Civil Rights Act. You know, no, they just kind of what was the story about how the Civil Rights Act actually got passed? Is when they included women in there. And then all of a sudden, their husbands decided we're gonna go ahead and
Right.
push that through. That's not that's not it's not like they were pushing for our I mean, what did Susan B. Anthony and those others in the early parts of this women's suffrage movement that were clashing with was it W.E.B. Du Bois? It was one of them. I can't
Mm,
remember. It was one of them that they
mm,
were clashing with, and it was basically
mm,
saying like, nah, or no, or was it Frederick Douglass? Actually, it was even earlier. Caddy, what was it? Caddy Stanton,
Mm-hmm.
and
mm,
them, and they were clashing, saying like, nah, before the Negro gets anything, you need to make sure we get the suffrage. Don't give the Negro nothing, and then after, when the Reconstruction Amendments was passed, you see them kind of pivoting and back white supremacy, pretty much to um,
yeah.
to make white women suffrage. And we were the enemy. They made us the enemy. So hey, nah, man,
Yeah.
like you need to catch that. That history needs to be highlighted in that women's museum.
That's right.
And then
Yeah.
if you're gonna talk
I agree
about
with the.
women, you definitely need to have
Mm,
ADOS women. You need to talk about how we was raising y'all kids and y'all was selling us and abusing us. When I'm saying us, I'm talking about ADOS women,
mm-hmm,
and as a part of the whole family. You need to talk
mm-hmm,
about how we was the sisters at NASA. You need to talk all of this kind of stuff. When you want to talk about women's history, you cannot. Then see, that's the thing about, and even when we get to Latino, we're gonna have to talk about some stuff on that too. I don't want to spend too much time in getting into it, but you cannot tell the American story without telling the ADOS story. And if you do, it's a travesty. So what I don't want to see with this Smithsonian is what happened to the Smithsonian of American history. I don't know if y'all in DC or in the DMV, but the Smithsonian of American history, what they did was, since they made the African American History and Culture Smithsonian, they took all the racism, they took all the elements of showing that are part of the story, and they kind of washed that out of the Smithsonian of National, the Smithsonian of American History, and just put all that stuff in, put all the Negro stuff and the race stuff in the Negro
mm.
Smithsonian.
Wow.
And we're gonna keep this American History Smithsonian for whitewash, so you don't have to see that dirty part of our history. That's what I feel when I
Mm,
go in there.
mm-hmm. That's really something.
Definitely.
That's deep.
All right, well, we passed the 2 hour mark. Think we had a good, lively discussion tonight. We wanted to touch on how do we fix this race issue? How do we fix race in the United States of America? And I believe that first we have to understand race. I don't think many of us understand race, which is why, and for those of you who came late, please go back and watch the beginning of this particular stream, because I showed some slides. I went into some history, went into some dates. I pulled from the teachings that I follow in Prophet Noble Drew Ali as well, in conjunction with race, because he was, in my opinion, one of the earliest pioneers of trying to break us out of these racial categories that, like I said, serves as a flotation device for one group and an anchor for another. And it's been that way since, it hasn't changed. It hasn't changed too much at all. So I think that and as we push forward politically, I think having an understanding of race is crucial. How are these things embedded into early American or the early American legislative process? How was the biblical narrative, for instance, of Canaan used in early American or the early American political process? All of these things are important because without an understanding, I believe, it's my opinion, of these things, we keep spinning our wheels. We're inside of what's the word? A menagerie. I think I said that correct. A see-through cage, a aquarium, if you will, a glass cage on a hamster's wheel, and believing that we're running somewhere. And so long as they have this psychological grip on our people to get us to look at our brown skin and declare it black, blackety black. I've heard people say, I'm super black. I'm blackety black, black, black. Nas got a song called Ultra Black, I believe it is. I am of the opinion, so long as they keep that grip on our people and we don't address race, it'll never be fixed. It'll never be fixed. So, I just wanted to end with that. Bros, did y'all have anything y'all wanted to end with before we get up off of
Yeah,
here?
I'll say this. I agree with the man from the book about the deconstruction of whiteness, the renunciation of whiteness. I think that we've allowed particularly white Americans to get away with a lot of nonsense over the years. They use that to beat our people down psychologically. One of the things they use white supremacists use is this idea that whiteness is something that goes back in history. And so you'll find yourself in debates with them about ancient Greece. You find yourself in debates with them about ancient Rome and how great those quote unquote white civilizations were. Don't let these Germanic people get away with claiming ancient Greece and ancient Rome as their history. That is not their history. Those ancient Greeks or Hellenistic people, those ancient Romans, those are not the ancestors of these people, these Anglos in America, these Germanic people in America. Those are not their ancestors. That is not their history. That is not white history. Though that's Greek history, if you want to use the term Greek. Hellenistic history, if you want to use that term, whatever. It's Roman history, but it is not white history. Those are not white civilizations. Don't let them get away with that stuff. And they like to do that. See, that's the thing they use. And so whiteness has to be eradicated in a lot of different ways. You got to take everything back, right? You got to start cutting all of that stuff off. And so I just wanted to say that because it was on my mind as thinking about the comment from, that the man made in the book about white American people denouncing this white term. They got to denounce that. They got to denounce a lot of the ideologies and a lot of the psychology that comes along with it. Stop claiming Greece and Rome as yours. It's not yours. Those people, as a matter of fact, if you do the research on it, the Greeks and the Romans really didn't even like the Germanic people. They actually enslaved the Germanic people. So don't let them get away with all of this craziness that they've been talking all of this time about this whole white supremacist thing. All that stuff is fake.
Definitely.
Yeah, man. I want to say, hey, I appreciate everybody in the chat and everybody out there watching. You know, our message is to uplift, and y'all might not see it. If you are a person out there that's watching who has been calling yourself white and feel some type of way about this message, hey, go listen to it again and see where we coming from. Because we, man, I was watching Good Lord Bird, I think it was, and I was a scene. I'm gonna give y'all a spoiler, so it is what it is. So it was one scene where one of the plantation workers that was one of the higher up Negroes, almost like a Negro overseer or something, right? At the plantation, he's the one who told the youngin Onion to pretty much get away. But when it came down to it, when he saw this the stuff was about to pop off and John Brown was about to do his thing, they went in and took the slave owner. They just revolted against him and just captured him. Right? They captured him, and they brought him to where John Brown was at. They were going to use him as an exchange. So he said, "Damn, what the hell? I didn't forget. No, never mind. I didn't forget.
You just set the whole thing up.
Oh no, I remember what I was saying. I remember now. All right. So the colonel was breaking it down. I've been so good to y'all. Why is it that why don't you just give up? You know, I can save y'all. I can save y'all Negroes. I'm messing up the quote. But basically he was saying I can save y'all Negroes from all the despair. And he's like, look, you don't understand what John Brown is doing. He's trying to save you from yourself, you know. So what our message is, you know, what we're doing, of course, we're trying to uplift our group, but by uplifting our group, we're making America have to abide by the principles which were righteous that it has in its documents. And then until America does that, it's going to continue to suffer some serious spiritual problems, and a whole lot of more issues that are going to be coming down the line. And you can even see it economically. They said racism is essentially and systemic racist white supremacist oppression has caused America a $16 trillion loss in wealth. Well, I mean, is that okay with you, or do you want to fix that? You know, so that's kind of, if you're a quote unquote white person, you need to stop calling yourself WHITE, because really, if you want to do that, then it's really WIGHT. I am a reparationist. Peace and love.
Peace. So family, take us up out of here. Y'all know the motto: don't just fight the power, become the power. And then and only then will you have the power to make a change. With that, I say peace.
Peace.